Welcome to Within You, a podcast that explores the unknown, the liminal space, as you navigate between now and what's next. As I navigate, as we all navigate between that messy middle. Yo soy Viviana Carrasco, wisdom teacher, mindset mentor, and transformational guide. I am based here in Funky Town, which is Fort Worth, Texas, and I am so pleased to welcome you to this episode. I'd like to welcome back Sarah Dietman.
Hello.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien. It was so fun to hear you introduce yourself in Spanish.
I'm kind of, really embracing my Latin X and all that stuff lately. I think that's one of the positives of this whole season.
What do you mean by this season?
That's a good question. The stirring up of awareness of, so over the last few years, I guess, really recognizing how strong the efforts at assimilation were for my parents and my current awareness of the distinction between assimilation and integration and like what really is me, right? It is not me to try to fit into everyone else. It is me to be me in a world where everyone wants you to be like the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like reclaiming my heritage, reclaiming my culture. That's what I would say.
That's some deep stuff right there.
Yeah, it's all deep. We go deep here. That's what we're here for.
Where the good stuff is.
It is where the good stuff is. Sarah, I am really excited that you accepted my invitation. One of the things that I have recognized over the years that is a core sort of belief of mine and a way that I like to practice in my life, because it was such a shift in awareness and in direction for me when I actually got this, that I love to sort of put a pin on experiences like it. And I really want to find ways to share this attitude, this belief, this way of life, this worldview with my listeners so that they can kind of use it as a tickler for their own brain and their own life. First and foremost, I want to thank you for joining me without a script. We don't know what's going to happen in our conversation. I haven't given you any questions to think of it in advance. I recognize how scary that might be, not having a framework. So thank you first and foremost.
Well, yeah, I mean, I trust you in our conversation, so I'm down.
Cool. Well, and the specific conversation that really got me excited was you sharing with me that you like took a bath. That seems simple, but it's like a huge deal. Can you revisit that for the podcast listeners with me?
Yes, baths. So I guess, what were we talking about that made me realize it? You are a regular bath taker, right? You always talk about kind of like needing to cleanse, and it always sounds so nice and luxurious. But I live in an apartment, and it's an old school apartment. It's super cute, but the bathroom in itself and the bathtub, it's like a porcelain tub, but the drain doesn't work. So I've never taken a shower, and I've been in this apartment for over 3 years. And I don't know, I just, baths honestly aren't always super appealing to me. But it was last week that I'd heard myself say a few times now that, I'm in Minnesota and it's getting colder. I'm like, oh, I just want a hot tub right now. Just like comforting, warm, bubbly feeling around my body. And yeah, it was Friday the 18th, I think is what the date was. And I had just gotten back from a session, and I took a shower and was just trying to warm up. And I had received the news that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away. And so it was kind of just this surreal experience of kind of like numbness. And as I was showering, I kind of was just staring at the wall, like what the processing, I guess. And then I thought again, I'm like, God, I just want a hot tub. Like, even though I was in a hot, warm shower, I just wanted that comforting, warm water around me. And I just randomly was like, you know what? I'm going to make do. And I threw like a little covering over the tub plug and let the bathtub fill up. And I finally took a bath. So yeah, it was a strange experience because it was kind of like I said, I was a little bit numbed out, and I was just kind of letting myself process, like, in this moment, what do I want most? And I just kind of sat on that for a while. And that's when the, wanting to take a bath came up. And I think because of the circumstances, I was able to let everything else go and just kind of surrender to the fact that I want to take a bath and I don't care, I'm going to. So yeah, it felt really good. As good as it could have felt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and part of why that got me so excited is a couple of things. So the first is you tuned into your deepest need. Like that, it's easy for us in scenarios where we feel numb or, we want something is to not really recognize what we're wanting. Like I do it super often when I'm standing in front of the fridge with the door open, right? I'm not really tuned into what is it that I actually need in this moment. So I was excited that like the deepest like soul need was sort of being expressed, and like there's no hangover. There's no sort of quote quotes hangover to that because it's going to refresh you. It's going to renew you. So I was excited about that. What most excited me when we had that conversation is that you hit that like, I don't give a shit moment. And you said, I'm going to make do and make it happen. Because over the course of a couple of years, you've, maybe wanted to have a bath, haven't, whatever. It's never been like, I'm putting words in my mouth, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But in that moment, you like made it happen. And it was always, this is the key, it was always there within your reach. So I now follow this sort of life mantra that what we truly need is either within us, deep within us, right? If it's that unshakable sort of center, or it's within our reach. And it might not be exactly what our mind is imagining, but it's definitely what we need. And that's kind of what I saw in the story and what I felt when we had the conversation.
Well, yeah. And I think what was so interesting about that moment and getting me to that place too was just like the heaviness of the news and everything, like, and just being in that state of processing helped me cut through my expectations, which are what a lot of times hold me back, and like got me to the core of like, what is it that I want? Like, of course, when I think of taking a bath, would I like it to be nice and bubbly and some essential oils and candles and, of course, like, and I think that's what I think of a lot of the time. But at this point, like it helped me cut through that. And it's like, no, I just want to be held by some warm water. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it was right there and it had been there all along.
All along. So I have another example that we were together in Pismo Beach in 2016.
So long ago.
Yeah. And I want to share that example because it's the same but different, where we were having along the same lines, the same kind of conversation, like, tell your side of the story and then I'll go into mine. I don't want to change yours.
Well, no, honestly, when you reminded me of this, I mean, you needed to remind me of this because I didn't remember it. I mean, I think it was our last day and we were going to be heading out. And so we just went to I don't know if we just went out to an Outlook or what we were doing. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be so nice if I could see a heron? And then all of a sudden you were like, look down. And it was like, there was a heron there. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, but I want to add some context to it because we had the same vein of conversation, like what you wanting being outside of your reach, what you're wanting not being there, not being able to see signs that, you're being supported or guided. We were walking along the beach and we're having these really deep, heavy conversations. And you almost surrendered to, like, I asked you, like, what do you want in this moment? Right? Like, what do you want? Like, just ask for it, look for it. And you sort of walked out into the water. And after a few minutes, that's what you asked for. You said, if I could just see a heron, that's what I want. And I got chills throughout my whole body. And really quietly, I said, Sarah, look down and to the left. And she was there, or he was there. I don't know.
I'm happy you retold it that way because as you said it, I got chills because it's insane that something like that, even when it was a profound experience, has been kind of in the back of my brain now. Like I didn't remember it that way.
Yeah.
I didn't even remember it really, actually.
Well, and that's why one of my favorite neuropsychologists is Rick Hansen. He talks about how we have to take in the good. And he uses this metaphor of the good experiences in our life are like Teflon. They just really slide away. I mean, they don't stick. They're just gone. Because over the course of thousands of whatever, hundreds of millions of trillions of years, our bodies have really trained themselves to be like Velcro to the bad things, right?
Yeah.
So that we don't go near danger, so that we stay safe, so that we survive. And our life now doesn't have lots of lions and tigers and immediate present dangers. Like there aren't a lot of opportunities where we're almost going to fall off a cliff, right? Or we're almost going to get like killed in the jungle. Like our danger is really to our self-image and what people think about us. And so those moments, like we have to take them in and make them $1,000,000 moments, like by revisiting them, by remembering them. And the other thing is our memory kind of changes over time, and I'm grateful for it. Like we edit.
Mm-hmm.
No, it stuck to me. It really stuck with me. I don't know. I think because of that whole weekend, right? And I don't know if you do this. I'm going to ask you a question. I actually revisit journals where I write down things that were, I'm going to use the words magical, significant, just felt really insightful. And that's another way that I remind myself of those things that are just like, moments of awe and wonder. Like I look for that in my life.
Well, even as you were describing that, kind of like good memories kind of slide off, like on a pan in Teflon or a Teflon pan, that idea popped in my head. I'm like, okay, so then if we know this, those are the memories and stuff that we need to write down so that we have the evidence of it to come back to. And like the fog of memory, doesn't kind of wash the details away.
Mm-hmm.
But, what's interesting too, when I'm thinking about kind of the bath experience and the heron experience, I think what struck me the most with kind of taking a bath was like, again, letting myself get to that point of like setting everything aside, getting to that deepest desire. And I think sometimes, on a regular basis, that's not easily accessible or not readily accessible for me. I haven't tapped into a way of letting that come a little bit more easily. And so that's when I think what was so exciting about it was that realization of being able to get there on my own. Because like I said, even like you said too, it's either kind of that is a way of accessing, of getting to that core, but also through other people and reflections. And so that's why the heron thing is you helping me remember that, and it's like, how many other things happen that I don't have witness to?
Mm-hmm.
That has me curious.
So if you were to, one of the things that I'm at a loss for words right now, there's so many things coming at me. First, I want to acknowledge, like I know just because of the way that our brain is set up that we ignore 97% of what's going on around us. We have to, we'd be in sensory overload. Do you know what I mean? But I think that it's important to share, ay Dios, with the listeners, like we're going to see what we look for. Like another metaphor that Rick Hansen uses, you can tell he's my favorite, is that our brain is like a Dyson vacuum cleaner with a spotlight sitting on top of tofu. Tofu takes on the taste of anything that you cook it with.
Mm-hmm.
And then this bright spotlight and this like suction cup. The experience I want to share is I was in a funk one day. I love to look out into the horizon and just sort of go into conversation, probably the same sort of physical, mental posture of prayer, right? Like I'm in conversation with her, with God, and by whatever name you call her, for the listeners, don't, get caught up in that. And I was kind of pissed off. I was looking out into the horizon and I was angry and I was letting it out. And then I dropped my gaze and I'm like, again, just like that surrender moment, right? Like, I don't know. And something told me like, look up or look again, or, just look again. And I looked up and there was a rainbow literally right in front of me. And I took a picture of it because I didn't believe it. Right. And I went over to David and I said, do you see a rainbow here? He says, yeah. I was like, okay. Because it just felt improbable, right? Like, how is that going to happen? And the message that it gave me is that we have to look again with love. Look again with love. So one of the things that I heard in you sharing, both the surrender, right? Letting go of the expectations, but that you allowed yourself some kindness and some compassion. And I think that's magical, like that window or that doorway of just being a friend to ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's only then that you're able to be that witness for yourself when others aren't there too.
I agree with you. Yes. And I also want to nudge that a little bit because even if, in my opinion, right, and this is going to feel free to push against this because I'm only speaking from my experience. When I feel alone, like I'm in something by myself, I really check myself and start to call on if I'm not ready to call on a physical person in life, like right now in this world, like I call on my abuelita, I call on the ancestors, I call on my guardian angels, I call on them for my guys all the darn time. But it's easier to do it for somebody else than for myself. And I try to remind myself that even if I'm physically alone, like it doesn't mean I have to do something by myself.
And I think from my experience too, like even though I'm able to recognize that, there's also those times where it's like, in the back of your mind, you're still knowing that you're choosing not to call on somebody or call on additional support too. And for me, sometimes that's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious, I think, still.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we've been socialized to do that. I mean, our culture is so strong around this silly freaking idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like this fierce independence. And it's bullshit. I mean, we are so interdependent.
Right. Well, that's one of the biggest things. I mean, I think that's the crisis of our time right now, is that idea of, being an individual and kind of the individualistic society, which has led to a lot of what people suffer from now.
What we're referring to, depending on when you're listening to this, is the COVID-19 pandemic that really hit the United States for me in March and continues through. In real time, we are in October 2020 right now.
And Vivian, I would add too that what I'm thinking of is like mental health and loneliness and depression. So that, heightened by the pandemic.
And the social unrest, right? Around
the lack of justice. Yeah.
Thank you for those words. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is, one, so the first point is yes, the world is experiencing this. And this is the first time in our collective history that I'm aware of that we have something that has rippled and impacted the world where we can see it, right? Where the borders, the imaginary, you're there and I'm here does not exist.
Yeah.
But secondly, because of that, right? Then we retreat into not going dancing, not having, the social interaction that in all reality, by all stretches of the research, like the key thing to our happiness is our social connections. So it's really pushing us.
And I don't even know, there's probably some psychological term for this too, beyond privilege, I guess, would be kind of this idea of like survivor's guilt too, when it comes to how you're affected by these things and whether or not you should find joy in moments when others aren't experience it or are experiencing the opposite end of the spectrum. So it's like balancing that cognitive dissonance and probably emotional dissonance of how is it okay for me to feel okay or to even feel joy in moments when so many other people are suffering. And again, that's a little bit of that mentality of like me and them within the bigger picture. But I think that's also real when it, among the collective.
Absolutely real. I attributed that to being Catholic, just feeling guilty about everything. But but I've also become this really, I want to say starch. That's not the right word. And it's like advocate, huh?
Staunch?
Starch. It is staunch, I think.
Okay.
This like advocate for joy. Right? Like joy is still our right. And there's a quote by someone that I'm thinking like, we have to, like the world is a furnace, right? And we have to sort of fight for our joy, not fight. I don't want to use that terminology, but
believe in its power.
Well, we can feel joy. Like one of the things that has brought me the most joy recently, like beyond happiness, right? Deep joy, like fulfillment is when I sit outside and I can smell the sage and the rosemary and the lavender from my garden. Like the wind like wisps it across me and I'm like, one, the sense of smell is of all our senses, the one that hits us without going through our brain. So I could recognize that the power that these like memories are bringing to me from these herbs. But secondly, that my hands dug in the earth to plant these seeds. And through the miracle of nature that they've grown, right, with water and sunlight. And now that they're offering me this aroma, I believe we have to tap into that joy. We have to allow ourselves to feel that, even with everything that goes on in the world. Like the world will never be in complete peace and harmony. So if we wait to be happy until it is, then we're never going to have it.
When I wonder for you, like as I was hearing you say that, it sounded so beautiful, first of all, just the entire cyclical process of it. But, when you're in that moment, is there a distinction for you between what joy feels like and then what you just said of happiness?
Yes. First of all, one of the things that I've recognized over the last few years that I didn't know before, and this is important for me to say, is that I didn't recognize that I was not my emotions, right? I used to refer to myself like I am angry or I am this. And that's like not where I am anymore. Like I'm feeling angry, right? And recognizing that if I allow an emotion to move through me, it'll take 60, 90 seconds, 120 seconds. And it's the narration of my mind, the story that brings me back into that feeling if I wanted to. So there's a much more graceful dance between myself and my emotions than in my past. And I recognize happiness as a hit. Like it's a releasing of endorphins, of all those good chemicals and hormones that come when you get something that you wanted, you get an achievement. It's almost like a gaming theory, right? You hit that next level, you do this thing, you accomplish it. Like it's a hit. And then it goes away and you need more. Joy for me is this undercurrent that is always available to me regardless of what's happening. And the way that I am reflecting on it now as an adult, because I don't have a lot of things that, like I'm not faced with not paying my bills. I'm not faced with not eating. I'm not faced with, thank God, like any of my loved ones, like being unhealthy or in the hospital right now. You know what I mean? Like that's when you really have to dig into finding that joy. But I think that if I look back some of my youth and some of the experiences I've had over my life, even when things were really, really tough, there was that undercurrent of peace and joy there. And what's coming to mind for me is like David being deployed after 9/11 and the state of fear that we were in as a country, and me being by myself in Virginia, away from family, and actually, just around that time or during a hurricane, like there's a threat of, so the hurricane actually is more of a relevant story because there was a threat of us, like our house being like blown away. Like we could see the trees touching the ground, right? We had no electricity. And we sat around the table with a candlelight and we played some game, probably Monopoly at the time. The guys were 8 and 12. So even in the middle of a storm, like you can bring yourself to your center physically, emotionally, psychologically. Did that answer your question? Did I go on a rant?
No, yes, it answered my question. No, it wasn't a rant. And I also think as I was hearing that, what I also came away with is that joy and peace play off each other. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg, which comes first. Like in that last story you told, my assumption is that you played the game. The joy that got you helped you tap into that sense of peace among the storm that was happening around you. But in other cases, it can be kind of like that undercurrent that feels a little bit more peace in some of those times that you can't necessarily identify it as joy. I don't know. That's a helpful distinction, I think, between peace, joy, and happiness.
And also a distinction in how each of us language things and what context brings to each of our words. Because joy for me isn't this hop, skip, and jump, right? It's not the Disney movie, whatever it's called, Inside Out.
Yeah.
Which if you haven't seen this movie, it's a really cool movie to watch from an emotional intelligence perspective. Yeah, you're right. That's not it. For me, it's a very stable, slow kind of current.
Yeah, kind of like that bath water.
Yes. Well, and it brings me right back to what got me so excited about having this conversation with you is that what we need and what we want, in my opinion, again, feel free, you, Sarah, and anyone who is listening, to kind of noodle this around in your own experience and test it, like experiment with it. It's within our reach, literally, within our arm's reach, or within us. And the reason that I am so adamant about this now is because so much of my life, I feel like I lived waiting, right? When I have this, when I do this, like it was this future, like this, I don't know how to call it, but it's like, I won't be happy or I won't. And again, there's that happiness, right? I won't have arrived to whatever it is until I have that or until I get that. And like, I'm even thinking of like imaginary future granddaughters, God willing. Like, I don't want them to waste their lives in that way like I did. And maybe it's something that we have to do as a human being because it's an experience that we each have to learn individually. But if I could help someone get there faster than I did, like, I think that's meaningful.
Yeah, I'm just thinking for the skeptics out there too, right now. You know, in those situations, a lot of times too, I've heard you tell me that a few times, Vivian. And I think in those moments when you're searching and you kind of like get to that half surrender and you're like, okay, all right, like I get it. Like now, you know, how am I supposed to feel this? Or where can I see it? Like I'm ready. For me, it's not something that can be premeditated necessarily. I guess, and my intention in saying that is just recognizing that, like, even if you are skeptical and it doesn't always happen when you're hoping you could kind of see that, like, thing that is supposed to be only an arm's length away, like, I don't know, just continue believing that it's there and it will be.
Thank you. How would you say that a skeptic could build their belief?
I can only speak from my experience as a skeptic, I guess. And I say that with a caveat because it's like sincerely not wanting to be a skeptic, I think, but it's kind of my MO. And I've, like Vivian has said, it's just been, you know, we've been conditioned that way and it's in lots of nooks and crannies. For me, it is time and it is those experiences of like what you had just said of like, I can hear you tell me those different things, but until I experience the bath water and like, you know, oh, I can have a bath, it doesn't take hold and it doesn't resonate as deeply. And so I guess the closest thing I can say is time, but I know that's not 100% accurate. I don't know how to put my finger on it right now.
Well, I feel like you really hit the mark when you said it has to be in my own experience. And for you in that moment, it was being held and comforted by a warm bath. And one of the practices that I love that you do that is available, I think, to anyone outside of our breath, right? Because you and I even started with grounding ourselves into our body through our breathing. So that's always available no matter what. Because if you're breathing, you're alive. And I don't practice it often, but I really want to, is to like lay on the ground and allow the earth, you know, Pachamama to hold you, like to just be held by the firm earth. And if you're on carpet or whatever the ground is for you, like imagining your body just sinking into the earth. Like that is an experience I think that someone could start with.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's kind of allowing yourself to sink into the ordinary. And then when that happens, that's when it becomes and feels a bit more magical. Because when I, you know, if I were to be talking about like, oh, I took a bath, like that's an ordinary thing. But it's like allowing yourself to be there fully in all of your senses and like also the sense of appreciation for what it really is beyond kind of that superficial idea of readily recognizing it as a bath or laying on the ground, but kind of the aliveness that comes with being in that ordinary moment.
Boom. Like I am near tears. I want to rewind that. I want the listeners to pause and rewind that and listen to what Sarah just said, because that is what I believe. Like if I had a hammer, just like the ordinary is holy. Like the ordinary is divine. The ordinary is extraordinary. And I challenge anyone to like not like see that somehow, because if you imagine, like I think back to like the $1 million moments in my life, they're ordinary moments, like looking down at my sleeping baby who just finished nursing. Do you know what I mean? You know, like being handed a piece of paper. I made that moment extraordinary because it was after years of study that I walked across that stage for my doctorate. Do you know what I mean? But I was just handed a piece of paper. I was walking across the stage. Those are ordinary things, right? It is holy to see the freaking miracles in our day-to-day life. That aliveness, you've got to look for that shit. You've got to make it be something that sticks.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to do that. That's part of the training that we have to do. We aren't born that way. We don't develop that way. That is our humanity, right? We've got to train ourselves to do that. And the way that we train ourselves to do that is by having those experiences and helping them stick One way to help them stick, I think, is what I mentioned earlier, like journaling. I journal on a app. I do a visual journal in my app. It's called Leap. There's tons of them. This is not endorsed or, I don't get any money from Leap. But I challenge myself to find a moment in my day that brings me awe, that brings me a smile, that brings me something that's on the sort of higher end of the scale, right? And I revisit that sometimes. That's one way that I do it. Is there a way that you kind of like help your magic moments, your happy moments stick?
There is. And it's funny because it's like, lately I have not been doing it. But as you say that, like, I just think of all of the goodness that comes from it and makes me want to do it again is my reflection journal. And that's kind of that idea of making those memories and those moments happen, being in collaboration with the world around you. Like I'd set my intention for the day or whatever it would be. And then in the evening, kind of reflect upon my day to see how it showed up, because it does show up without fail. But it's just, you have to be willing to find it and see it and recognize it for what it was. So I think I want to do more of that again.
You know what I love about that is it sounds so playful and fun, right? Almost like a game, like an experiment. Like I'm going to ask for this and then remembering how it showed up without really holding your attention on it.
Right. Like of course you have your intention, but that could come in thousands of different ways. And like, how's it going to show up? I don't know.
And I think that also slowly trains you to expand your expectations too, right?
Well, and it helps train me out of being the skeptic, right? And trains me to being that, a little bit more active believer versus being proven wrong. Finding more of the positive and noticing that more readily is what I want versus not seeing the negative.
Right. And one of the things that is coming up for me in that moment is because I feel like sometimes I've been judged as a Pollyanna, like I'm always seeing things through the positive. But for me, I don't look for like brushing away the negative. Like I want to see reality. I want to see truth. That's my intention. I want to see reality. I want to see truth. And the more that I look for the truth of things, the more that I can find that hope or that hint of kindness or like love. Even like right now, what's coming to mind is someone being mean to me. And in the past, I would have been like, that person is horrible. They are a horrible person. And now what I believe is truer, what I believe is closer to reality is that person is in pain and that person's experiences are clouding their current like understanding, right?
Yeah, I like the idea of looking for the truth lands well. That feels right.
Yeah. So it's not like, for me, I just wanted to, it's not like this positive. I hear this word and I really don't know what it means, but I think this is kind of like it, like spiritual bypassing. I'm not saying everything is like cool, right? Everything is good. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my own experience, right? When people are like, oh, you're a ray of sunshine. I'm like, when I let you see me. Because I retreat into like despair and sadness and loneliness like everyone else. I just don't show up when I'm that way.
That's interesting that you say that. What do you mean you don't show up when you're that way?
I'm actually trying to understand the dance between that right now, like right in this moment. I think it's the reason I said it is because it's so top of mind, because I am noodling around the next experiential journey, because I believe in experience. I believe in creative expression. That is why within university, which is the online community, moves through seasons of experiences together. And I'm feeling called to offer more support and more connection through a weekly, like very structured, facilitated experience. And I feel like my experience over the last few years is that the community really informs what I offer. I'm really in tune, and that's been verbalized and like reinforced. And so I just believe it now, right? In tune with the needs of the community. And that's what I'm feeling called to do. That is very different than what I am personally feeling. I'm personally feeling this strong urge to retreat even deeper into myself, into isolation, into self. So I'm struggling between the two right now. Like, which one do I do? And if I show up when I'm not feeling like I can, like, will it be clean, I guess. So I think most people, I'm not going to say most people, I'm going to speak to my own experience. When I'm sad or when things are going on, I am more silent. I'm not doing as much outreach. I'm not creating as much content. I'm not reaching out to friends. I'm not being as social. That's just my own personality, I guess.
That makes more sense. No, I can see where that happens. I don't know. As I hear that, though, I wonder if like the perception of showing up is in the context of being a leader.
In my current experience, I'd say yes.
Yeah. I don't know. For some reason, you say show up, and I'm thinking of October in general. And this month, we have 2 full moons. One was yesterday, and one is on Halloween. And, in between that, though, is going to be a lot of darkness, but 2 bright bookends. And I have no idea what that means other than that's the imagery that's coming up as we're talking about this.
It reminds me of one of my favorite sort of self-comforting mantras, kind of, by Julian of Norwich. And it's not her exact quote, but it basically boils down to all is well and all will be well. And I use that as a guide when I'm in a dark period. It'll be okay kind of thing. Sarah. So I want to wrap up this, what you need. First, tuning into what you need at your deepest level. And we've given you some examples of that. And then recognizing that there's a possibility, a little tiny one, that what you want in some form within your reach. And that is a key thing right there. Not the big, high expectation. Hey, here's a version of it, right? It's within your reach. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to invite you to be curious about that and to help yourself see that and offering yourself support in whatever way you need. If you're not ready to reach out to a human, then definitely allowing yourself to be supported in whatever way, whether that's a warm bath with water, in dead man's pose in Shavasana, on the earth, or whatever works for you. And this is the thing, it has to fit for you personally. It's different for everyone. But before we wrap up, I want to share with everyone some exciting news. You don't know when it's going to happen, but I know, Sarah, that you are working on your very own podcast.
Yeah, but I think now that we talked about this in context, the reflection journal is what I'm most excited about right now. So I'm working on that instead.
Yay! So, and we've had some conversations. I know that you've had an illustrator. Is it a photographer? Tell me more.
I guess this just goes to show with the experience itself in terms of time and welcoming versions of everything. I don't know. I randomly allowed myself to be inspired, and I went to an art show and I saw this awesome watercolor painter and some of his work. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want that. I don't know what I want with it, but I'm going to reach out to him. And then, at that time, I was also doing my kind of reflection journaling in terms of doing the morning intention and writing in the evening. And so I don't know, all of those little things came together. And so I had the water painter kind of paint an illustration for the reflection journal. And so now I just need to put all the pieces together so all of you can enjoy it too.
Yay, I can't wait till it's published and I get my hands on one of those beautiful things. Yay, 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 yay. So if someone wants to reach out to you, I know that you're also a certified life coach. Is there an email address or something that they could connect with you, Sarah? Especially someone who I think you do a beautiful job of dancing between that skeptic and that other end. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy having you on the podcast, enjoy being in conversation with you, is because you're able to sort of pull and push without making people fall over. And you have a...
I love that description. I really like that.
So if someone's interested in being witnessed by you, how would they find you?
They can reach out to me via email at Sarah, SARAH, at upgrade. I haven't said this in so long, Vivian. I think it's Sarah at upgradeyourevolution.com.
Perfect. And if you can't find Sarah for any reason, feel free to connect to her through me and I will put you guys in touch.
Perfect.
Yay! So you have so many invitations, so many call to action, so many beautiful, juicy things that you could rewind and kind of visit through. If you're interested in connecting with me a little deeper, I invite you to go to viviancarrasco.com. find a spot on that page, they're all over the place, that has a little button that says, yes, please. And then in that, after you push that button, it's going to ask you for your name and email. But what I want to draw your attention to is the reason that I put yes, please. The reason that the button says yes, please is because you're making a commitment by saying yes. You're making a decision to move in a specific direction, and you're making a choice. And I want you to recognize that. And the please isn't for me. The please is because it's my form of prayer. It's my form of you setting your intention with kindness for this inner transformation and these skills that we talk about here in the Within You podcast. So if you want to get closer to me, visit the website, put in your name and email, yes, please. And you're always welcome to talk to me about Within University, which is the community that I have the honor of facilitating. And so until the next episode, thank you for joining us on the Within You podcast. May you be well.